And we're back. Dave Kopel works with me, for me. He's a lousy guy. At the Independence Institute, the only man I know who's worse at golf than me, and I appreciate that about you. I want to talk to you about drug and gun smuggling. That's mostly gun smuggling. Now, tell me what the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and Explosives now, their job is?
Their job is to, twofold, like lots of federal regulatory agencies, is to do the regulatory civil side of licensing firearms dealers or alcohol production, things like that, on the civil side. And on the criminal side, they do the criminal enforcement of people who break federal gun laws.
Give me the quick skinny. American guns are found south of the border. And we're seeing them more and more, and they're being used in drug wars south of the border and perhaps creeping across the border. So we've got our guns manufactured in this country, getting out of this country and going to Mexico. Is that an issue for us, or is that Mexico's issue?
Well, it should be an issue for both countries. We don't want guns we don't want guns from the United States being used in crimes in the United States or in Mexico. So it's important to do whatever is reasonably appropriate to try to stop that. The United States has given the Mexican government huge amounts of money for law enforcement, yet Mexican border controls for people coming from north to south into Mexico are quite lax. On the Guatemalan border, which is a huge source of weaponry coming into Mexico from the international black market, say surplus Warsaw Pact weapons, border enforcement is almost non-existent. They have about 150 agents for roughly 600 miles of border, so it's very easy to get across there.
But what is starting to come to light now is how those guns got across, and was the federal government complicit in making this happen? This, at first blush, it smells a little too conspiracy-like for me, but as we look into it, some of these guns have been used in crimes, and our own federal government have been an accessory to that. Am I saying that too strongly?
No, you're saying it exactly right, and this is a scandal, I think, of at the magnitude of Watergate. Watergate was something for which Richard Nixon was appropriately forced from office, and for which his Attorney General, John Mitchell, went to prison. There was a criminal operation in flagrant violation of United States laws and in violation of Mexican laws. And in fact, the Mexican government has announced it's going to seek extradition for the officials responsible for this. The U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, out of their Phoenix and Tucson offices, ran an operation called Operation Fast and Furious, where they went to federal firearms licensees, the gun stores, people who have a federal license to sell firearms.
These are private citizens who own gun shops and are licensed to sell them to civilians.
Exactly,
right.
And they have that license because, among other things, they've passed a federal background check, and there are lots of rules and regulations about what they can do, which BATFI, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, enforces on them. So when your regulator comes to you and says, we have a program we want you to sign up for, it's hard for a lot of folks to, in a practical sense, to say no to that.
All right, let me stop you there. So in other words, the guys who give out the permits for people to go ahead and sell guns on a retail level said, hey, yeah, we're the ones in charge of your permit. We need you to help us with an undercover operation.
That's right.
And of course, what is a gun store going to say? No?
Exactly. And they also know that when their 3-year permits are up for renewal, it's BATFI that's going to decide whether they can stay in business.
So what was the operation? What was Fast and Furious?
Okay, a straw purchaser is someone who can legally purchase a gun, but is purchasing a gun on behalf of someone who is a prohibited person, such as a convicted criminal who can't purchase or even possess a gun.
So knowing that I've got a bad criminal record, I can't pass a background check, I'm going to give you $500 and I say, hey, buy me this gun, you buy it, and you're the straw man.
Yes, and in the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is the trade association for the gun business, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms have run a joint program to teach licensed firearms dealers how to detect straw sales, and of course to refuse to conduct the sale when it becomes clear that a straw sale a straw purchase is being attempted. So, but BATFI, very soon after President Obama took office, did the opposite, and they said, firearms dealers in the Southwest, we want you to allow straw sales. And we're going to set up a special program where we can record these sales going, we'll have like hidden microphones to record these sales going on. In fact, the acting director of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms was watching some of these straw sales take place from his office in Washington, D.C.
As they were happening?
As they were happening.
Wow. So in other words, this was, we want to see where these guns go during a straw sale. So we know that this is illegal, but we're going to watch it happen so we can follow the gun to where it goes? Was that the idea?
Well, yes, and you could find a legitimate law enforcement purpose for that if you say, okay, the dealer sees a straw purchase attempt being made. He tells one of his employees, go call the bat fee people. They send over a guy in an unmarked car who sits outside. The straw sale goes through, and as the straw purchaser leaves, then he's tailed by the bat fee in a undercover car, and you keep on following him around for as long as it takes to find out what's going on. That's fine, but a few problems developed. One, bat fee knowingly allowed these guns to go over the border.
So they were following the straw purchaser, and the straw purchaser took the guns and they watched them go across the border.
Yeah, in fact, there was U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was murdered by human traffickers in December of last year. 2 of the guns from Fast and Furious were found at the scene, and in fact, those 2 guns, when they were going over the border, the guy who was the criminal, the straw purchaser, was stopped by Customs and Border Patrol, and the 2 guns were found in his car. Customs and Border Patrol calls bat fee, and bat fee says, "Oh, just let him go." With his guns.
Let me see if I'm understanding this. So you're telling me that the federal government administration, run ultimately by Obama, since he's the chief administrator, one of
Yes.
his departments, has this program.
The Department of Justice.
Department of Justice runs Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. They allow these guns to go across the border knowingly. In fact, tell a customs official, let the guns go through. Those guns are used at the scene of the crime where an American is killed.
Yes, and that's what finally leads several bat fee employees to come forward as whistleblowers. And they start telling the story of this operation to congressional investigators. Senator Charles Grassley, the ranking member of the minority member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, Darrell Issa, who is the new chairman of the House Government Operations Committee, Cheryl Atkinson from CBS News. Those 3 have been really and some bloggers, David Cordrea, have been the leaders in developing this story.
You liken this to Watergate. So let me ask you the question that was asked during Watergate. Who knew about this, and when did they know about it? Who knew what, and when did they know it?
Well, Ken Melson, the acting director of ATF, was basically being set up as the fall guy for this, and the White House was putting out leaks that he was going to resign soon. What Melson did instead was, on the 4th of July, go to meet with investigators from the Government Operations Committee, but Republican and Democratic staff, both sides, with his own lawyer, not with a lawyer from the Department of Justice, and tell his version of the story, which is, we realized this was a bad idea, and when congressional investigators started coming in, yes, we know that our agency stonewalled all you investigators, but we actually wanted to provide information, but we were told to continue the cover-up.
By whom?
By higher-ranking officials at the Department of Justice, is to the extent of which that private testimony of Melson has come out to the public. So we know that the one step down from Eric Holder, the Attorney General, are the acting Attorneys General, the Assistant Attorneys General, who have each different slices of the DOJ that they're in charge of. Wiretaps have to be personally approved by an Assistant Attorney General. Wiretaps for part of Fast and Furious were approved by the Assistant Attorney General for Criminal Enforcement at the DOJ. So we know that there's absolute knowledge of this just one step away from Eric Holder. Eric Holder makes this claim, boy, that this was all a big surprise to me, and he testifies to Congress in spring. I just found out about this a few weeks ago. That was a flagrant lie, because he'd met with Charles Grassley on January 31st, and Grassley had personally handed Holder copies of letters that Grassley had sent to Holder about Fast and Furious on January 27th and January 31.
What law is broken here? when we go back to Watergate, we can say this is a law, but it was a cover-up that was really the problem. Was it illegal for the BATFE to put out and allow these straw purchasers to go and buy these guns? Was that against the law, or was it allowing them across the border that was a violation of the law?
Well, first of all, there's perjury, and we'll find out more about that. But when you testify to Congress under oath, it's a crime if you don't tell the truth about that.
And you believe Eric Holder has committed perjury?
I think there is a growing possibility that is the case. It is a crime to obstruct justice. It's a crime to obstruct Congress, a congressional investigation by illegally withholding documents. It is and of course, it's a crime to participate in international gun smuggling. I don't know what part of federal law allows federal officials to commit the crime of international gun smuggling.
Unlike Watergate, Americans died because of this.
Agent Terry's dead, and according to a Mexican senator, these guns have been used in at least 150 other shootings in Mexico, including some of which resulted in a homicide.
How many guns have the United States government watched go across the border? Do we have a number?
The best guess now would be about 2,500, and these are most of them semi-automatic rifles.
All right, so we're talking about so-called assault rifles.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that the Department of Justice, at the level of an assistant attorney general,
Yes.
knows that we have allowed 2,000 so-called assault weapons to be smuggled with our knowledge across the border to be used against Americans?
Well, to be precise, the Assistant Attorney General who approved the wiretaps in particular cases, we don't know for sure that he knew the full scope of this.
Fair enough.
We also knew that BATFE BATFE has over about 100 agents in Mexico to help the Mexican government deal with gun smuggling, and they're the ones who will run traces of American-looking guns that are found in Mexico. And even the BATFE's attaché in Mexico City, their top guy there, was mostly kept in the dark about what was going on.
Now, BATFE has said 4 border states now need to have the dealers tell us whenever they sell 2 or more of these guns. This is singling out these states, and so now there's even more regulation coming down as a result of this, and it seems not a good fit.
Well, it really shows the whole cynicism of the anti-gun lobbies, who with their sanctimonious claims that, oh, we're so concerned about gun violence. But in fact, if they really, when the gun violence happens to be perpetrated because of a government agency knowingly putting guns into the hands of Mexican cartels, they're all on the side of, oh, this isn't BATFE's fault. They didn't really do anything wrong. Maybe they made a little mistake. And then this new regulation about federal registration of rifle sales is flagrantly illegal. It's explicitly prohibited by a congressional statute.
This story is only going to get bigger. Would you agree?
I think will ultimately result in the resignation and possibly the criminal prosecution of Attorney General Holder.
Dave Kopel, thank you, and thank you. Listen for me late nights on 850 KOA. Tell a friend, and we'll see you next week.